There's two views is the heart of Ableton Live. It's the arrangement view and the session view. You can get at the two views by hitting these buttons in the upper right-hand corner. So that's the arrangement view, this is the session view. That's what the Ableton logo represents with the vertical and horizontal stripes. It's these two views, so I can't stress that enough. I call it the best of both worlds because we have view number one here is just like probably every other program you've ever used, just like Pro Tools, Logic, Cubase, Nuendo, GarageBand, etc., where we have the waveform left to right, bars and beats up top, minutes and seconds here. You can do everything that you can do with Pro Tools and Logic in Ableton arrangement view. It's missing a couple what I would call multi-track recording creature comforts, where for example we don't have an edit list, where in Pro Tools you can go and jump back and see all the discrete specific edits. Ableton has unlimited undos. It's those kinds of things that I feel make Ableton a much simpler, more efficient program to use. If you check out the menus here, you notice there's hardly any sub-menus at all. And the ones that are there are not very complicated. As opposed to some other programs where it's like menu and sub-menu, sub-sub-menu, and it can be very confusing. Ableton's very straightforward, designed by musicians, as opposed to a lot of these other programs which are really perfect recording engineering programs. But it's like if you are coming from more musician perspective, more of a live performance perspective, DJ, sound design, beat making, I don't think those programs make as much sense for me personally. So when I first got into computer music, I was coming from a jazz drummer sort of place and got really into the sounds of electronic music. I'm really enthralled with the idea of breaking out of the limited circle of instrumental sounds and then being able to use anything to make music. So that really appealed to me, but like I said, these linear sequencers just didn't have the same workflow for me. I felt like it was a lot of stop, 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 start, when I'm editing and working on music. So enter Ableton Live and the session view, also known as the live part of Ableton Live. And this is non-linear sequencing. This is completely unique to Ableton Live. There's no other program that really does anything like this unless you build it yourself in Max MSP. And the way this works is each little colored cell is called a clip, and you can double-click on that and see the contents of the cell or the clip in the detail view here down below. So again, I want to stress the simplicity of the design and the graphic user interface. If you notice, a lot of people get thrown by Ableton and say, oh, it's so difficult because it's really new. Like I said, it's not a tape recorder analogy. So you have to kind of get used to it. And for me, it has become a revolution in how I make music with the computer. So, yeah, about the GUI, you just notice there's buttons here. These are just hide and reveal buttons that will hide and reveal aspects of the graphic user interface. So IO is the input and output. We can hide that if we're not routing sound in and out of the internal software. S and R for sends and returns, we can hide those. M for the mixer section, I'll go ahead and keep that open. D for track delay, which you probably never use, and X for crossfader, which is amazing if you're a DJ. Anybody here a DJ? Raise your hand. I think you do. Okay, never mind. We don't talk about the DJ stuff. But it is the only program for live performance. Like if you see a computer on stage, if they're not using Max MSP or something boutique like that, and they're not using a DJ program, there's a very, very good chance using Ableton Live. It's really become the standard for live performance software. Because it's the only program that really does this and allows us to go, from the beginning of our song, we can go to the middle, to the end, and back to the beginning, all on the fly, really like you would with an instrument, without really ever stopping the sequencer. And I call this freeing yourself from the timeline. And that is the idea. This is not my music, this is just a really simple techno example that I always use because it's the clearest example of the most conventional way that people use Ableton Session View. The program really isn't a Swiss Army knife, not an audio application, and you can do just about anything with it. Is that next door? Yeah.
You're going to be hearing that all the time.
It's throwing me a little bit, but I'm going to try to be professional. Okay, so because this view is completely unique to Ableton, we have these hardware manufacturers that are making dedicated Ableton Session View controllers. So it's sort of interesting. This controller is called a Launchpad. It's made by a British company called Novation. Yet it has the Ableton logo on it, even though Ableton does not sell or distribute these products at all. It only works with Ableton Live because Ableton Live is the only program with the Session View. So Akai has come out with the APC40 and the 20, and Novation has the Launchpad, and there will probably be more in the future dedicated Ableton controllers. But that's why you cannot use this with any other program unless you hack it. This is not going to work with Reason or Logic or Pro Tools or anything. It's an Ableton session view controller for live performance. So back to my story about how I was getting into electronic music from live performance. I got really into the sound of electronic music, but then I go to these shows and people would be playing with a computer or a laptop and they look like this on stage. And I was just like, man, is he checking his email or playing live? You have no idea what they're doing, but they could just be pushing play and checking email. So controllers like this really make it obvious. I can get away from the computer. It lights up, like, you know, blinks, it triggers clips. This really turns the computer, again, into a performance instrument. And I think it's important if you're on stage, people coming to see you, and if you're just doing this, it's not very exciting to me. If you're performing, it is a performance art. So those considerations I think are important. So beyond just the non-linear ability to sequence, you'll notice that I have all sorts of clips scattered around, and I can mix and match them and play these loops and clips in different orders and combinations. So it's kind of like, you know, a few years ago there was a Skittles marketing campaign where they're talking about with their 8 fruit flavors, you can come up with all these unlimited fruit flavor combinations, and I forget, someone did the math, it was like 6,800 different combinations. So it's kind of the same idea, like you can get so much mileage out of all these little pieces and really play live and create new music on the spot, which I think is really exciting for electronic computer musicians, where a lot of times you think about that, it kind of has to be pre-planned or you kind of have to be a DJ. Well, this really allows you to play the computer as an instrument. So I can mix and match all these pieces, but what most people do is use these master scenes over on the right-hand side, and what that does is they'll trigger the whole row of clips. So most people set up here on master scene 1, you'll notice I'll trigger that and it triggers the whole row. And I go to scene 5. Those are loops that are meant to play together. So a lot of people would arrange their live set going from top to bottom, and this would be the intro, the verse, the chorus, whatever. You move down your set that way. So you can have unlimited sounds and clips in Ableton. You'll notice the red rectangle there is showing me what's viewable on my launchpad. I can navigate with these buttons up and down, and these buttons side to side. So you can have as many sounds, clips as your computer can handle. And Ableton loads everything up, it streams it from disk, so there's really no limitations. You can have, 1,000 tracks if you want. You can, 1,000 clips, any way you want. It's limitless. Any questions on just this basic, right, nonlinear sequencing? Really turns the computer instruments. It's the only thing like it. So here's some really cool features. We have these two views. What if I want to record when I'm doing it to the session view? So I think of this view as like the instrument, turns the laptop into an instrument, and then this view is like the tape recorder, Pro Tools sort of part of things. And you'll notice I have 12 tracks here that correspond with the 12 tracks here. So it's literally as if each track is recording into the arrangement view. So here, all I need to do is record enable, the global record up at the top, and Ableton records everything that you do on the fly. That includes all automation, clip launching, everything. So I'll actually pass this to you, and you can improvise with my clips. So you also notice everything that he does is don't do anything yet, is quantized on the input. That's due to this global quantization up here in the center. So I have everything set to 1 bar, and I recommend you do probably to start with, especially if you're doing rhythmic, organized rhythm, beat-oriented music. Keeping everything at 1 bar will just make sure that when you trigger the clips and the parts of the music, everything happens on the downbeat or the 1 of the measure. So yeah, you can also, I know someone's going to ask, yes, you can change the time signature to whatever you want. You can do tempo changes, time signature changes. It's really easy. But I'm doing everything in 4/4 just because it's the simplest way to demonstrate these techniques and not confuse anyone. And it's important to note that you'll notice that pretty much everything I'm doing in this context of techno or electronic music is synced up to the tempo. But it's important to note you can turn all the tempo sync functions off. So like here I can go up to none if I want, and then you'll be able to play it just like a sampler or something. So let me go to bar 1, and I have my global record on, and then what's your name?
Anthony.
What is it?
Anthony.
Anthony's going to go ahead and jam, and as soon as you push a button, it's going to start the sequencer and start recording. So go ahead and just hit some buttons. You really cannot make a mistake. And if you want to take this or play with this on your computer at home, this is the Swayzak live set. You can download it from Ableton.com. This is not my music. It's just a fun tool set to play with a bunch of clips. So also, if you don't have Ableton yet, it's the only major digital audio workstation that gives you a free fully free and functional demo for 30 days, so you can save with it, you can export it for 30 days. And if you think about it, if you're a musician on the road or something like me, and something happens to your computer, like it breaks or gets stolen or whatever, as long as you have your project files backed up on a hard drive, you can borrow any computer, buy a new one, whatever, download the demo of Ableton, you got 30 days to figure out your situation. So it's the little things like that that just really add up for me at Ableton. So, alright, so he's, no, I made a huge mistake and I had arrangement looping on, so I'm sorry, Anthony, you get another chance. So go ahead and jam again. So we'll take this even further. You notice he can trigger any clip at any combination, he can trigger any major section of the song at any time. But then what's really special is the real-time time stretching, okay? So I'll explain warping in a minute, but all these tracks are set to loop and all these tracks are set to warp. Warping is the way Ableton beat matches and time stretches audio. So if your tracks are warped properly, you can, and you want to change the tempo, instead of stopping the sequencer, typing it in, waiting for it to render or consolidate, all they do is drag the global tempo up and down, and watch this. The audio will follow along like magic. And you can continue to trigger clips, play live, and go all the way to 1000, and all the way down to 20. And Ableton records all of that, including those tempo changes. So I'm going to go ahead and stop you, so make your big finale. So now flip back over to the arrangement view, and you see every single thing that he did, including automation, tempo changes. Let me get that back. Thank you very much. So every single thing he did gets recorded here in the arrangement view in perfect quality, and now you can take advantage of all the detail editing kinds of techniques you would use in a program like Pro Tools or Logic. So I can get in here, I can delete this, I can duplicate this, right? If I grab this title bar, I can move this around, and you can split clips hitting Command E. But if you just like highlight a piece and then grab the upper rectangle, it will just automatically cut that piece of audio out for you. It's just the fastest, most efficient, and fun way I found to edit audio, and it's missing all those bells and whistles that honestly confuse me when I'm in the heat of the creative moment. I don't want to think about, oh, what's that submenu, that tool to do that thing, and I really appreciate the workflow. So I'm sorry if I go on too much about that. I'm really excited about it. So yeah, here's your audio, and like I said, you can edit that however you want. Here's a potentially tricky thing once you start using Ableton at home. So we have those two views, right? The session view records into the arrangement view. But what happens if I'm playing this back in the arrangement view, and then live, or I want overdub, or so this is playing back exactly as you recorded it. But what if I do this and change some stuff? So you'll notice immediately Ableton reds out the tracks that are now different in recording, and then this big red button up in the center top of the program lights up red. That's called the back to arrangement button, and what happens is when you deviate from what's recorded in the arrangement, the session view will override what's there, but then that button will light up to indicate that you're deviating from what was recorded here. You can see I'm overdubbing what is there. The back to arrangement button will snap back to whatever you had recorded in the arrangement. So that's a really interesting way to improvise, to get variations, and this is the kind of thing where I'll spend a lot of time creating the sounds and the loops and doing sound design, playing with synthesizers and time stretching audio and recording field recordings, and I do all this preparatory work in the session view, and then I can sort of leave that part of my brain alone and step into this more musician role and just improvise. And when I have all my pieces for my composition, I can sit here and in an hour I could do 10 different arrangements of the song, and then what I usually do is go to sleep, wake up the next morning, and listen to all 10 versions, and then pick the one I like the best. And I find that this is an incredible tool for sketching out and demoing ideas, and then of course, when you're done with your composition, it's the perfect platform for live performance. So, actually, to plug this in before I go any further. Any questions on just that part? So just please interrupt me if you do have questions about it. So that is session view, nonlinear sequencing basics, and that is the #1 thing that makes Ableton different from every other program, is this way of performing live. So let me talk for a second about recording and the warping. So, like I said, warping is the automatic beat matching, time stretching stuff, and the way it works is like this. let's just show you recording. I'm going to open up my input-output section. Ableton works with every audio interface and every MIDI interface, so it really doesn't matter what you have. Ableton will play well with it. You just want to go up to Preferences and check your audio tab, and then the audio input device, whatever you have plugged into your computer will show up right there. It's also worth mentioning that Ableton works exactly the same on the Mac and the PC. That's another thing I love about it. So I don't have an interface plugged in, I'm just going to select my built-in mic. And then to record, you can see audio from, I'm going to select my external input, but it's worth mentioning Ableton has like unlimited internal routing. The catchphrase I use is anything to anything, or one to many, many to one, which is to say you can route one track to multiple tracks, or you can take multiple tracks and route them through one track. So for example, if you're recording a drum kit with 10 microphones on the drums, and you want to use one compressor and one reverb to apply to all of those mics at the same time, you can just route all your different mics through one channel in Ableton. The routing is supremely flexible, and that's just what I wanted to illustrate. So external input for anything coming in from the external world into Ableton. And then I'm going to turn monitoring off so I don't get any feedback, record enable my track, and now you can see my voice coming in through the meter right here. To record on the fly, of course I can record in the arrangement view just like every other program, but I want to stay in this inspirational session view. So all I got to do is hit these little record buttons, and now bam, we're recording on the fly. If I double click on the title part, you can see the audio coming into real time. I'll just give a couple snaps there. And then imagine this is an instrument, whether you play guitar, saxophone, vocals, whatever, and you want to loop live. All I need to do now to loop this live is to hit that same button again. And now we're looping. And I can get in here and find a loop point, drag my loop brackets around again.
And then imagine this was there. And then imagine this was there.
So what warping does is allows you to create. I can double click and create these warp markers. Usually you'd use these with the transients or with some sort of drums, which is the spikes or the attack portion of the audio. And then I double click to create these yellow warp markers, and they're kind of like little handles. Or I prefer to think of this as like when you turn warping on, it sort of elasticizes or liquefies the audio, and then these double-clicked warp markers become like push pins in a wall where I can move them, and then you'll see the audio stretch around it like an accordion or a rubber band. So I'm just going to take those 4 snaps I did and put them on the beat so that they'll match up with the tempo. So this is one of many techniques you can use warping for. Here's my metronome in the upper left-hand corner. Volume of the metronome is this little headphone icon next to the master fault here. So you can really drag this around, and let's do creative patterns. Put this one bar in. You can record anything that easily, and then just start manipulating these hit points and come up with some interesting rhythms and things that you know, practice over, play over, or whatever. Right? Cool? Questions? No?
Can you copy and paste those?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, one of my favorite techniques in this view is to take that clip and I'll duplicate it, either by going to the edit menu and selecting duplicate, or Command D is the shortcut. So I'll take this clip and then I'll Command D a couple times. And then this one, I'll keep it here, and then the next clip, I'll create a variation. So let's do something like this, and this. So now I have this. And then I trigger the next clip, the first clip, it goes to that. And then maybe the third clip, I'll change it all together.
Instrument with it's there. And then imagine this is an instrument with this. And then
yeah, so you can record whatever you want, and you can do this live. One of the projects I have in Chicago is really interesting, where I do the beats and sound design, and I play with an avant-garde cellist. And every single show we do, she'll start playing a 5-minute cello avant-garde improvised solo, and I'll just sit here with Ableton and just record little pieces of what she's doing. I'll sit here when I hear a phrase happen that I like, I'll go to the next part, I'll record this, and you know, until I have maybe 20 little samples and loops, and then I can get in here and create my loops just by looking at the waveform, and I'll do all those variations. And then I'll have other sounds loaded in here too. But now
I can just record.
And I can start spitting back out, parts of the cello improvisation then that she'll play and improvise with these recordings of herself that I'm controlling and manipulating. And then, get really deep into the effects processing and that kind of thing too. But that's the basic idea. One of many ideas and techniques of how you can use the session view. So keep in mind, like I said, it's a Swiss Army knife of an audio application. There's so many things you can do with this program. So let's show you some other cool stuff. So getting into more MIDI and virtual instruments and that kind of thing. Every version of Ableton Live comes with the simpler device, which I think is perfect for any sort of students or beginners with sampling, synthesis, and sound design, because it's just one page of parameters. It says drop sample here, so you can load any sampled sound you want into it. Let's take this great recording of myself talking and just drop it into here. So it takes whatever you feed it, and it assumes that the sound untouched is middle C, and then it automatically transposes your sample across the MIDI keyboard. So Ableton works with every MIDI controller, like I said, but if you don't have a MIDI controller, or you're on an airplane or something and space is an issue, or if you're like me, sometimes I'm just too lazy to walk across the room and plug in the keyboard, you just hit this little keyboard icon in the upper right-hand corner, and that effectively turns your QWERTY keyboard into a MIDI controller that I can play. And this middle row of keys becomes the white keys, and this top row of keys becomes the black keys. And you can switch octaves with Z and X. So if I do this, I'm going to just turn it up. So that's middle C. Wait, that's I'm gonna take a little different part.
See the audio in real time.
Right, so feed it whatever you want and instantly be able to play your sample transpose across the keyboard. Is anybody into dubstep in here? Raise your hand. Everywhere I go, everyone is overwhelmingly into dubstep, so I'm shocked that no one here cares. Does anyone hate dubstep? Raise your hand. Raise your hand if you hate dubstep? Okay. Well, I always do this demo because of the popularity in this country. It's kind of interesting. It's like 15 years old, but in the last couple of years it has exploded. And if you don't know what dubstep is, it all sounds the same, and it all sounds like and the backbeat's always on 3 instead of 2 and 4. It's kind of unique, but I find it very polarizing genre. People either love it or hate it. No one just is like, dubstep's all right. But this is, I can take any sample that I give this, and I'm going to loop it, and I'm going to turn the loop length to be very short length until this becomes like a wavetable oscillator. And I can move the scarp and travel through the sample. Choices. Yeah, there goes. Right, there's a wavetable synthesizer made out of this internal microphone out of my voice. And from here, if we're going to go dubstep with it, I just go down a couple octaves, engage my filter, turn on my LFO, put it to beats mode, turn up the LFO amount, and that's one of the worst sounds I've ever come up with using this. But you get the technique. You can take anything, loop it real short, and then treat it like a synthesizer. So I really, really like the simpler device. I have a lot of producer and engineer friends that use all kinds of tools, even have like a Moog synth in their house, but they like using this because of how easy it is. And then if you're recording your own samples and looping them like this, you really have unique waveforms. It's like a Moog synth only has a specific amount of waveforms, but they don't have this of my voice, like that kind of thing. So that's anyway, that's how that works. So then you've got a couple different versions of Ableton that you can buy right now. There's Ableton Intro, there's Live 8, and there's Live 8 Suite. So the main difference is Live Intro is a $100 version of Live. You guys all get educational discounts, so I'm just giving you the prices of what they are at Guitar Center for normal folk, but you get like almost half price. It's pretty sweet. But Ableton Live Intro is $100. Ableton Live 8 is like $450, and then Live 8 Suite is like $600. And the difference is Live 8 Intro is limited in every way. Like you're limited with track counts, you're limited with how many devices that you can have. It's missing some of the advanced production devices that come with regular versions of Ableton. But it's really cheap, and it does everything that I've showed you so far. So Ableton Live Intro is a really good choice to get started. Then Live 8 is the regular version of Live that I believe you guys have on these computers here, and that does everything that I'm showing you up until now. And then there's Ableton Live 8 Suite, which is the XL version of Live and contains 6 virtual instruments. And the 6 virtual instruments are analog, which is a virtual analog synth, kind of like a Moog. Operator, which is an FM synthesizer. Electric piano, which is just a Wurlitzer Fender Rhodes emulator. Sampler, which is kind of like that simpler but fully featured with all the pages of modulation you'd expect in an industry standard sampler. And then 2 physical modeling synths. One's for strings called tension, and one for percussion mallet kind of sounds that's called collision. So I'm not going to show you all those right now. I'm just going to maybe introduce you to analog and operator. Again, this is what I like so much about Ableton Suite instruments is that it all fits down here. It's incredibly efficient and economical in terms of workflow and space and mouse travel and all these things. So this is a 2 oscillator analog model synth, and what's unique about it, again, is how it fits down here. And each section of the synth changes this middle window. So like, if I go, here's the default sound. Just a triangle wave. Okay, so we got one MIDI track and an instance of analog on here. If I want to create a MIDI clip, I'll just double click an empty clip slot, and here's my piano roll that you guys are all familiar with. And I can program by hand there, double clicking, or I can record on the fly and record in notes that way. Or like I said, you can do this. So it's a pretty fully functional MIDI editor that I really love it. There's a bunch of cool features and enhancements that I'm not going to get into for this presentation because I want to keep this moving, but Ableton MIDI editor is awesome. And then for this device, what I like so much about the Suite instrument is if you want to make your own sounds, it's just really inviting and inspiring. It's not complicated at all. The signal flow kind of goes like this. It's really great and straightforward. So like if I wanted to make one of those basses, just open up my amplitude envelope, so, real simple synths, turn on the oscillator on. So, here's the pitch envelope. So, I really like how hands-on you can get. It sounds like an analog synth to my ears. And it's really great and efficient to create your own sounds with. You know, you can get all sorts of portamento going here if you engage the glide button and get those notes that slide up and down that are really popular in modern electronic music right now. Yeah, I really, really like the synth. And now let's compare the graphic user interface to the GUI of Massive, which is probably my favorite third-party synthesizer right now. But look at how much space it takes on the screen. I mean, you do need 2 monitors or 2 displays to really do serious sound design and sequencing at the same time. So that's the real reason I like